edition, presented by Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. I'm Dave Lochran. With me, Adam Scher, and the man, Awesomeo himself, Alex Baker. Baseball season continues on, fellas. Week 1 is almost in the books for the NFL season, but here we are, Adam. Baseball still on the grind. We're going till the end of September.
Yeah, definitely. It never really sinks into me like that it's winding down until football starts. So I guess hopefully a strong last 3 weeks or so.
All right. Alex, how was football week 1?
Man, it was crazy, as it always is. It's like you never know what to expect. I know it changed a lot of people's lives. The crazy prize pool was during the week. The Yahoo tournament was pretty fun too. Adam, I think you were sweating that one pretty hard, right?
Yeah, I finished 6th in the $25.
Nice, man. That's awesome. I think that one it didn't fill, so there was some nice overlay there for all the Yahoo players.
Yeah, and that means, and congrats on that, Adam. That means that we've got a $1 million baller this week on Yahoo, and it is 150 entries. Now, not all of their contests are. This one is 150 entries. No CSV though yet, right, Alex?
Yeah. They may add that soon, relatively soon, but I don't think it'll be available this week, is what I heard.
Well, you can put in more than 10 lineups if you'd like for that one. The other ones are not 150, but the $1 million baller is, and you can get $30 in Yahoo Sports Rewards points by signing up through us at awesomeo.com. It's very simple. Go to the homepage, check that MLB drop down, and click on articles. You'll see the Spotlight Hitters article, and right at the top of that article, the link is right there. The article is entirely free. Spotlight Hitters right on the MLB landing page, the homepage or MLB. You sign up using that link for Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. You get $30 in Yahoo Sports Rewards points upon depositing, and you can get into some of these monster football contests that they're going to be running all year long. They also have a free roll, the $1 25K, 4K to first if you're playing with a smaller bankroll. But go ahead and definitely when you deposit, get that deposit bonus by signing up through us at awesomeo.com in the Spotlight Hitters article just by clicking that link. All right, let's go ahead and jump into this. We've got 8 games today, and Alex, Adam, what's your initial thought on this slate? Pitching, anything stand out to you? You see it being what kind of slate do you envision this being, just from how we kind of always intro the show?
Yeah, I think pitching seems pretty straightforward to me. There's clear-cut guys that I like or at least in the case of the bottom tier that at least stand out as the best in that range, in my opinion. The hitting is where I think it's really interesting because there's no Coors game. There's no game in Texas. The Red Sox and Yankees both have tough matchups. So I think that in tournaments, there's no real clear-cut stack that you feel like you have to have. And on slates like that, I think that it's just fun because, ownership just plays an even bigger role.
All right, let's jump into it. Alex, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Aaron Nola, Mike Foltynewicz. A pretty interesting game here. Folty, very much an up and down season. It hasn't been pretty in large part, but recently he appears to have turned it around to some extent. Still struggling to get deep into games, though. He hasn't gone more than 5 innings in 3 of his last 4 starts. And really on the season, I think he's gone 7 innings once or twice. On the flip side of this one, Aaron Nola towing the rubber for Philadelphia, coming off a really brutal start against Cincinnati. Got through only 4 frames, but on the whole, he's been a very solid righty all season long with a respectable strikeout rate despite not getting a ton of swinging strikes. But it's a very difficult matchup for him. What are your thoughts on this pitching here?
I think that Aaron Nola, he's in a pretty decent spot, but one of the higher priced options of the day. Not really loving it for a salary. It's a decent matchup given that, they're a pretty strong team, but they're not too bad for strikeouts tonight. I'm seeing about average, and Nola has a 27% K rate, so that bodes well. Folty, I'm a little bit less bullish on. I mean, he's a below-average strikeout pitcher facing a team that is about average in the Phillies. So I don't really see a huge reason to go there other than if he just fits your lineup perfectly.
Adam, any interest in pitching?
Not a ton. Nola, I agree, is a good pitcher. Atlanta's lineup is a little bit watered down here. You have, the top four, Acuna through Donaldson, are all really good. But then it does kind of drop off a bit. So I don't think it's the worst matchup or anything, but he is expensive, and you do have a few other high-priced pitchers that I just like a little bit more. And at least in our initial ownership projections, we have Nola getting 21% ownership on DraftKings, which made him the fourth highest owned pitcher. So it's not even like you're getting a situation where everyone's scared away, it doesn't seem. So I don't really see getting to the pitching here. Foltynewicz, just not a great strikeout guy, not a great matchup against Philly, tough park, and there's a lot of, I think, pretty strong mid-range options on the slate.
What about hitters? Obviously, some troubles for Folty at times. Looks to have turned it around a bit, as I mentioned. Do you find yourself on any bats from this one, Alex?
Let me check. I think the prices are pretty high for the matchups here. The over-under is only about 9, and Philly is just approaching 5 runs. Atlanta at 4.5, so not anything that will really inspire a lot of confidence. The prices are in the mid-4s on average on DraftKings for each team, and pretty high on Fanduel and Yahoo as well. So I think that it's going to be pretty tough to get to this game tonight.
Yeah, Adam, what about you here? Either side to you stand out as decent? We are in Philly, of course, not Atlanta, so there's some benefit there for the hitter.
Yeah, I agree with Alex. I think that Real Muto is one of the higher projected catchers. I think Harper is one of the higher projected outfield plays, but neither guy is cheap, and so they don't come out as like great options to me. Hoskins is probably a little underpriced. You get some value with Cesar Hernandez leading off. I don't hate Philly as a tournament stack, but I think there are several teams that I like a bit more.
Okay, I guess we can move on then. Get to number 2 on the slate: Boston, New York Yankees. Adam, we'll kick it off with you. James Paxton, Eduardo Rodriguez. Clearly not matchups that are conducive to pitchers' ERAs. James Paxton is very expensive, coming off a few really solid outings. Talk about turning it around, man. He went through a patch there coming off the disabled list where it did not look like him at all. Pitch mix was completely different than what we'd seen before, but he's looked more like himself lately. But now he's got to go up against a righty-heavy, power-laden Boston lineup, and then Erod against the Yankees. 2 lefties here facing a lot of really good righties. What are you doing with 2 good pitchers and 2 terrible matchups?
Yeah, I mean, two really good, two good pitchers, especially in Paxton's case, obviously really, really good. But they're not really priced down for this spot, and they're both really tough matchups in terms of not only productive offenses, but offenses that don't strike out a ton either. So on one hand, I think that right now we have Paxton projected at 3% ownership, and that's sort of interesting just because of how good he is. But I still just don't think that I end up getting there. I think that it'll be easy enough to differentiate with bats on this slate. And as far as the bats go, I think that there's really good values because both teams are priced down for their difficult matchups. In our ownership projections right now, though, we have the hitters that you would want, Judge, Torres, Mookie, and Martinez all getting ownership. So I'm not sure I want to go to a popular Yankees or Red Sox team in their respective matchups.
Alex, are you on the same page, or do you have a different take on this?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, these guys are pretty decent pitchers, but these are the toughest matchups in the league, and they're not priced down.
Okay. What about hitters? Alex, either side, Boston, New York. Again, 2 good pitchers, but tough matchups. So how do the hitters fare in this one?
I'm somewhat interested in the Yankees as kind of a contrarian option. There are a few guys that are decently priced on each site. Kind of Luke Voit being a centerpiece to my Yankees lineups tonight. Just batting 5th, and he's relatively cheap. Guy with a lot of power. And I think they have a pretty good shot at being the best team of the night. So I'll go with them a little bit, despite what the optimizers tell me. It's a little bit harder to get to them because they're expensive.
All right. Yeah, Adam, I know you touched on it a little bit. Is there anyone here that you really like from a hitting standpoint, though?
Yeah, I mean, I like the salaries on Judge, Torres, Voit, 46, 44, and 4K on DraftKings. Nobody in the Yankees lineup is over 5K. But I just think in our ownership projections right now, at least, we have Judge and Torres a double-digit ownership, and facing a pitcher in Rodriguez who is pretty good against righties, has held them to a 131 ISO this year. I'm just not sure that I want to play them if they're going to be popular.
Okay. All right, let's talk Miami and Milwaukee then. Alex, Jordan Lyles, and on the mound for Miami, Robert Duggar. That second start of his was he was super chalk. He was really good. Third start wasn't bad. 2 earned across 6 innings, but only 2 strikeouts, which is a lot more like him from what we've seen at other levels of play. He's facing Milwaukee, and Jordan Lyles going up against Miami in the pitcher-friendly Marlins Park. Not particularly cheap, but your thoughts overall on Jordan Lyles, who today on DraftKings is coming in at 18%. Among pitchers, we're getting Jordan Lyles as your 5th highest owned arm behind a number of talented righties, 1 lefty, but some really good arms ahead of him. Matchups are another story, but right now 18% ownership on Lyles on DraftKings.
Yeah, I mean, we've known all year to take guys against Miami, and yesterday reinforced that. Even Lamar Jackson could throw pretty well against Miami.
Yep.
Jordan Lyles perhaps has a little bit better arm than Lamar. He's a decent pitcher this year, about average strikeouts at 24%. Miami, all 9 roster spots or lineup spots are occupied by guys with below average power, so not a very threatening lineup, and the price seems pretty reasonable. So he's not like jumping off the page at me, but he's definitely a good play.
All right, Adam, Jordan Lyles, what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I think that by Miami standards, this lineup doesn't have as many strikeouts as normal, but by rest of baseball standards, it's still a good strikeout matchup. Their average, the 8 hitters, not including Duggar, have an average strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching since last year of about 23.5%. So still plenty of strikeouts in this lineup. Like Alex said, not a lot of power. And there's 7 right-handed hitters, which is really good for Lyles. He struck out 25.9% of righties this year compared to 21.9% of lefties. He's held righties to a 297 WOBA compared to 378 to lefties. So a lot of things really looking good for him. The only real negative, I guess, would be that he is priced up a bit for the matchup. Like his baseline salary is a bit lower than his actual salary tonight, but he grades out as one of my favorite mid-range arms. Yeah,
it's kind of hard not to, right? And Adam, among some of the guys that are projected for more ownership than him would be Degrom and Greinke and Bumgarner and Nola. Do you have more of any of them than Lyles today? Obviously, Degrom going up against Arizona, Greinke against Oakland, Bumgarner against Pittsburgh, and Nola against Atlanta.
Yeah, so I haven't crunched yet, but I have Bumgarner and Greinke both projected as slightly better, but still in the same ballpark as Lyles. So a lot will come down to ownership there, where right now, I think we just got an ownership update, so I haven't checked it. But a lot will come down to ownership there because I do have them projected so similarly.
What about hitters?
I think that Milwaukee is really clearly a top value stack. They're in a pretty good spot against Duggar. Trent Grisham's a great value leading off. Grandal's the top catcher play on the board, I think. Thames is cheap batting cleanup. You have $2,200 Travis Shaw in the lineup. So I think that they're a really good value stack. I think it's a team that you go to a lot in cash games, but we also have them projected for just monster ownership really across the board. On DraftKings right now, we have Shaw at 42%, Grisham at 25%, Yelich and Grandal at 18%, Thames at 15%, along with Spangenberg. So it looks like a really, really popular stack. And even though I think that it's a good one, if those ownership numbers hold, I think I probably end up underweight just because it's baseball.
Okay. Alex, do bats stand out to you specifically from the Milwaukee side?
Yeah, I think that they stand out in the same way as Adam, where it just seems way too easy to get to them. The Milwaukee team total is only 5.5 today, which is good. It's the second highest on the slate by only 0.1 runs, but that's no guarantee of very much success at all. So if they maintain really high ownership like we have projected, I think that they're probably I'm probably going to try to avoid them as much as possible, but it is hard to ignore that kind of value.
Yeah, it certainly is. Adam, as a stack, you mentioned that Milwaukee is appealing to you. Where do you think, and I know you haven't crunched yet, but right now, just as a collective, where would you rank this Milwaukee team?
In terms of like likelihood of coming through, or they'd be one of the top. Yeah, they'd be one of the top stacks for me. In terms of teams that right now I would plan on actually rostering in large field tournaments, they're towards the bottom.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Right now, they do have the highest top stack chances. Also the highest ownership. But actually, it's pretty wild. Ownership right now, they are well ahead of really every other team. So it is a stack that has a high likelihood of pulling through. They're at 18%, only team in the double digits. So kind of interesting there. We'll get to another game where one player is going to be specifically popular, Alex. That is Jacob Degrom at a home matchup with the Arizona Diamondbacks. We've got him very popular, 44% on Draftkings, 38 on Fanduel, which is pretty wild, and then 52% on Yahoo. So across the board, DeGrom's getting a ton of love today. Are you with the field on this ownership?
What is his ownership again?
44% on Draftkings, 38 on Fanduel, and 52 on Yahoo.
I think I'm a little bit lower on him than most people. I saw a really high strikeout prop today on one of the sites, 7.5 with minus 140 in the over. So people are really buying into this as a great strikeout matchup, I suppose. But I don't really see it that way. To me, this is a tougher than average matchup for strikeouts. Only two players in the lineup are above average, Christian Walker and the pitcher. So I think it'll be a little bit tough for him to rack up huge fantasy numbers, but it is later in the year, temperatures are lower, so that should be good for run prevention. And Arizona's team total of 3.4 is among the lowest we've seen all year, so you gotta like it from a perspective of having a game where he goes pretty deep, gets a decent number of strikeouts. But I'm not sure he completely justifies the salary tonight.
Okay. Adam, no team has a lower total than the Arizona Diamondbacks on this slate. DeGrom's a 223 favorite at home. Does he stand out to you as someone that should be getting this much ownership today?
I think so. Like, he's my top projected pitcher, and it's not by a huge margin, but it's by enough where, I think he's pretty clearly the top projected pitcher. The salary isn't that expensive. He's $53 on Yahoo. He's $11,200 on DraftKings. I don't think it's going to be that tough to get there. And Arizona's a below average offense. But like Alex said also, and where I start to back off DeGrom in tournaments a little bit, Arizona does have a really low strikeout percentage in this lineup. They're good at putting the ball in play. And that's not to say that DeGrom can't pick up strikeouts, because obviously he's a great pitcher and he's going to get his kind of regardless. But it's not a great spot for strikeouts. Like, it's relatively unlikely that he gets those extra strikeouts to really put him over the top. And we have him at 44% ownership compared to some other really good pitchers like Shane Bieber at 7%. So I think that you can at least make an argument in tournaments for either just foregoing the top pricing tier of pitchers or for pivoting to a similar upside pitcher whose median projection is a bit lower. But, like in cash games or in lineups where I'm already contrarian in tournaments, DeGrom does project as the highest scorer for me.
Okay. Thoughts on Merrill Kelly and the matchup for the Mets against Merrill Kelly?
I think the Mets are a pretty interesting stack. Kelly's salary is really cheap, so maybe you see some ownership going there. His fastball velocity has really ticked up over his last couple starts as well, up by about 2 to 2.5 miles per hour. And we've seen pretty good swing and miss stuff in those two starts. But his velocity is still like 93.5 miles per hour on average. So it's not like we're talking about an exceptional fastball where you would expect him to suddenly start having great success. He's really struggled with power this year. Lefties in particular, 16.5% strikeout percentage, 199 expected ISO. Righties have a 215 expected ISO. And it's a pretty good Mets lineup, especially at the top. All of McNeil, Alonso, Conforto, and Ramos are solid hitters. Cano, Davis, Nimmo, and Rosario aren't bad. There's not an easy out in this lineup for him, I don't think. So the Mets are, I think, a kind of interesting stack.
Okay. Do you find the Mets as a worthy stack today, Alex? I just want to point out that right now they have a very middle of the road, actually towards the bottom top stack chance, still 5%, and about 5% ownership on DraftKings.
They're somewhat on my radar, but I'm not loving the value. And in that case, I mean, the ownership would have to be good for me to be interested, but I see it actually is a little bit higher than I expected on DraftKings and Fanduel. Let me make sure it's true now. Oh, sorry. I'm just updating it. Yeah, I think it's right around where it should be, I think, as far as ownership. So, not really a team I'm gravitating towards.
Okay. And neither of us have anything to talk about for these Arizona bats, I assume?
I don't.
I think we should talk about Merrill Kelly. I think
go ahead.
He's a guy that this is DraftKings only, but that price tag of 6K will allow you to get in some more contrarian bats. So I'm interested in that. He's a below average pitcher, and the matchup isn't great for Ks, but that price tag of 6K, it kind of accounts for that. So I think he's a play. Okay,
makes sense. Houston and Oakland. Alex, Zach Greinke, Mike Fiers. Greinke, $8,400 on DraftKings, coming in with very little, a very low price point. I know he's not the highest upside pitcher, but you compare it to $9,600 on FanDuel, and then over on our sponsor Yahoo, Greinke is coming in at 47, 18%. So ownership clearly right now the highest on Greinke on DraftKings, only 8% on FanDuel. However, at that $8,400 price point, he is the second highest projected owned pitcher at 29%, Alex. Does he stand out to you against Oakland today?
He stands out in a bad way, I guess. I mean, Oakland, they're a team that kind of is on the rise. They have a strong lineup again today. Have them about 15% better in power than an average team. They have 4 pretty good power hitters in Chapman, Olsen, Canha, and Davis that I'm interested in. And Greinke is just kind of an average strikeouts guy, a little bit above average at run prevention. So I have him projected pretty low here. I'm assuming it must be a lot lower than other people if the ownership is going to be high on him today. So if that's the case, I'll probably look elsewhere.
Okay. Adam?
Yeah, I think that the matchup's really tough. Like Alex said, not a lot of strikeouts for Oakland, and they're an above average offense in terms of production as well. I think Greinke's a good real life pitcher, and normally that doesn't really translate to DFS all that well because he does have a pretty low 22.5% strikeout percentage. The one thing that does stand out though is that his salary has actually come down, so it's more in line with his strikeout numbers. Like normally he's overpriced because he's Zach Greinke and because he doesn't give up a lot of runs, but on DraftKings and Yahoo it's come down a bit. So I have him projected almost identical to Kyle Hendricks and Jordan Lyles. Right now we have Greinke the highest owned out of that trio, so I'm naturally going to kind of just be shifting some of that ownership to Lyles, I think. But if the ownership were to change and Lyles comes up and Greinke goes down, I'd be fine getting to some more.
Okay. Where do you have him projected among other pitchers today?
So I have him at 16.5 DraftKings points, which is, like I said, it's about the same as Lyles, Hendricks, but lower than, or a lot lower than like Bumgarner, who's 800 more on DraftKings.
Adam, do you have interest in Houston against Mike Fiers, who, in all fairness, has not been bad at all this year?
Yeah, I do. It doesn't look like Houston's getting tons of ownership, which I think makes sense since they do have some expensive bats in their lineup. Fiers, when he does struggle, it tends to be with right-handed power. So going up against a lineup that has Springer, Altuve, Bregman, but then also has Robinson Chirinos as a power hitting catcher option towards the bottom, has Mlb Dfs, who has a little bit of pop. It's not the easiest spot. And then when you also consider that the one aspect of hitting that Houston's park plays up is right-handed power, it's I think it's a pretty good spot for the Astros. Like I said at the top of the show, one stack that jumps off the page to me, like they have the highest implied run total on the slate at 5.6. So there's no one stack that jumps off the page. And if their ownership were to really go up, I would have no problem getting away from them. But right now, with all that ownership going to Milwaukee and then some ownership going to some other teams at the top as well, I think Houston is probably my favorite stack right now.
Okay, so you have them as your top stack right now against Mike Fiers. Makes sense to me. In terms of implied total, they have the highest implied run total on this entire slate. So that's pretty interesting, especially given that you look at just top stack chances. It's not bad. Ownership around 9%. On an 8-game slate, I think it definitely makes sense to have more interest than you normally would in the Houston Astros. What are your thoughts on hitters from this game, Alex?
I think it's pretty interesting. I like the ownership angle Adam's going for here. I'm seeing two players on Draftkings, and Altuve and Brantley are pretty high owned, as well as Bregman. The rest of the lineup's pretty low. On Yahoo, it's George Springer, who is the cheapest. He's at 24%. So I think you can build a pretty contrarian stack with the best projected team on the slate, the highest team total. The fact that they are a home team hurts their chances of being the top stack a little bit. You only get 8 innings if you're doing well. So that caps the upside, or it doesn't cap it, but it makes it a little bit less likely than a team like Milwaukee, who's a road team. Let's see. I think Oakland is a really deep sleeper tonight. I think that they're one of the lowest owned teams, but given that all the team totals are kind of close together, there's a 4.4 isn't too off the board. The prices are pretty hard to manage, but that could be just one where you stack it up. Your lineup's not going to look that good, but you'll have a good shot at winning outright. Okay.
Adam, do you want to speak anything on Oakland bats against Greinke?
We have them right now, the top stack tool. They're one of the most under-owned stacks, it looks like. I don't love the spot against Greinke since he is a pretty good pitcher, but Oakland is an above-average offense. They do have plenty of power, and Greinke doesn't get a lot of strikeouts, so they should be able to put the ball in play, which is appealing for those power hitters. So while I wouldn't normally love them, I do think that with their current ownership, they're pretty appealing.
Okay. Do you have any appeal or any intrigue by this Oakland team? Or Alex, you already mentioned that Zach Greinke does stick out to you as someone that isn't particularly appealing today.
Yeah, I think that Oakland has a decent chance of success. This isn't a slate where you can really make a team that's highly projected, so the fact that their value isn't that good isn't going to throw me off too much. I think there's some cheap pitchers that I can tolerate tonight that will allow me to get in some bats that are a little bit more contrarian.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Let's move on then, Adam. Madison, Bumgarner, good old Trevor Williams, Oracle Park, good pitcher stadium. We've seen Bumgarner specifically has been phenomenal there this season. Get him out of San Francisco, and he becomes an average to slightly below average pitcher. I mean, in all seriousness, it's been night and day at home and on the road for him this year. As from a fantasy standpoint, pretty much everywhere else too. What are your thoughts on Bumgarner against the Pittsburgh Pirates? Again, in a good park right now, getting some ownership, 25% on Draftkings, which is a decent amount for tonight, especially at that price. 13% on FanDuel. And on Yahoo, Bumgarner coming in at 27%, tied with Aaron Nola.
I think his price tag's pretty appealing here, as is the ballpark. You mentioned how much better he's pitched at home. He has a 26.5% strikeout percentage in Oracle Park this year compared to about 21.5 to 22% outside of it. He's held opponents to a 252 WOBA at home. It's 347 on the road. He's allowed 1.69 home runs on the road compared to 0.89 at home. And the Pirates don't have a lot of good hitters against left-handed pitching either. So the only real negative here is that the Pirates are still a difficult strikeout matchup. But you don't have a great strikeout matchup for Degrom. You don't have a great strikeout matchup for any of Bieber, Degrom, Paxton, Rodriguez, any of those guys at the top. Greinke's not a great strikeout pitcher. Neither is Kyle Hendricks. There's just not a ton of, I guess, opportunity cost on this slate in that regard. So Bumgarner does project well for me, and I expect that I'll have more Bumgarner tonight than I normally get to.
Okay. Alex, are you going to be heavy on Bumgarner today?
No, I think I might be under the field. I'm seeing Pittsburgh as a really, really tough strikeout matchup. I don't believe we have a lineup yet, but they consistently ring in as one of the harder teams to strike out. Trevor Williams even isn't that easy. He's at 31%. So right now the projected lineup has 8 below average strikeout batters. And that's going to make it really tough for Bumgarner. I think run prevention should be reasonable. But I'm still not seeing much of a reason to pay high prices for him. I like him on Yahoo, though, where he's kind of around the mid-range at 44. That, to me, is about what he should be.
Okay. Yeah, and he's getting some ownership there, tied for the second most ownership behind Jacob Degrom. He's also, $6 less expensive than Aaron Nola, and he's actually $3 cheaper than Zach Greinke. So I agree, definitely most appealing there. Alex, what about Trevor Williams against San Francisco? He has not been good. He is cheap, however, and some of these two-pitcher sites may call for him to be in play. But interestingly enough, he's only $29 on Yahoo, but he's only getting 8% ownership. And on DraftKings at 6,300, he's getting 15% ownership. Is Trevor Williams in play for you as a cheap arm, as your SP2?
I think so. Probably more on DraftKings than Yahoo. I do like that $29 price tag, though. This Giants team actually is known for being pretty hard to strike out, but tonight may be a little bit easier than average. I'm seeing a couple of high strikeout guys. One that recently got called up is Julian Davis. He's got a ton of power, and I'm really interested in him as a bat, but he also strikes out a good amount. And then the pitcher spot, Bumgarner, even though he's known for having some decent power as a pitcher, he strikes out a ton, 49%. So I could see Trevor Williams in a park that's good for pitching, kind of at least justifying a $6,300 price tag.
Okay. Adam, what are your thoughts on Trevor Williams?
Yeah, he's my favorite of the cheap pitchers. He's obviously not someone that I think very highly of as a pitcher. I don't think he's good, but the park is really favorable for pitching. The matchup is fine for run prevention. And as Alex said, as the Giants are calling up some more younger guys, you're getting more strikeouts. So I'm kind of hoping that I don't have to get to Williams in a lot of lineups because there's just not that much hitting to pay up for. But where I do, I prefer him to Kelly. I prefer him to everyone else down there.
Do you have interest in hitters?
No, not really.
Like on either side?
No, I mean, like Josh Bell's cheap. Brandon Belt is cheap, but it's just not a park where I'm really looking to attack hitters.
Okay. What about you, Alex? It's not a good park, of course, and Bumgarner's impressive. San Francisco Niners, there we go. That's the crossover. San Francisco Giants are not a good team. So is there anything here as far as hitters go?
I think the Giants are reasonably priced, so I could see getting to them. The only thing is the ownership isn't that appealing. I do really like this guy, Julian Davis, as a value play. A really sneaky play. But this guy had ISO of 353 and 377 in his two different AAA teams this year. That is about double the average. The Giants' AAA team is in Scottsdale. So I expect a lot more power there than in Oracle, but I think that he should still have a pretty decent chance of hitting home runs and extra base hits. So I think the talent's way higher than the price tag there.
Okay. Well, that was easy enough. Let's keep it rolling. Okay, we got 2 games to go. We'll come up on the Angels, the Cleveland Indians. Adam, Shane Bieber, Pablo Sandoval. I did, dude. Literally every time. Literally every time. If you didn't laugh, I would not have caught that.
I thought you were just saying it because like you have done it 100 times before.
Make that 101. It's never going to stop. Patrick Sandoval, 1% ownership today. Not exactly popular. Shane Bieber. This is where I've been waiting to get to this, Adam, because I know you're as much as a believer as I am, and he's just been remarkably consistent all season long with the really high ceiling. I mean, everything he does is incredibly impressive. His ownership projection on DraftKings is 7%. Now, granted, he's very expensive. I totally understand that. But how do you go about this when Degrom is a little bit less expensive and he's 44%? He doesn't have the perfect matchup. Nola 10-4 is 21%. Essentially what I'm getting at is Bieber, because he's expensive and facing the Angels, is 3% on FanDuel, and on Yahoo, where he's coming in at $52, is 18% owned, way less than a similarly almost identically priced Degrom. Talk to me about Bieber and where you stand on him today.
I think Bieber's a really, really good tournament play if you can find the money, because just how he projects and is priced relative to DeGrom basically has to keep his ownership down with him being more expensive on DraftKings and FanDuel and only $1 less on Yahoo. Like, I have DeGrom projected for a couple points more than Bieber, and that's why I said, at the top that I think DeGrom's the best cash SP1, and I think that he's obviously a really good play. But where you're getting DeGrom projected for 4 times as much ownership as Bieber's median projection is a little bit lower, but his ceiling is just as high as DeGrom's is. He has the same strikeout percentage. His Sierra is better this year. His K-BB percentage is better. And when you keep in mind that he's done that mostly pitching against designated hitters instead of pitchers, like, he's been the best pitcher in baseball, or the best pitcher on this slate.
Yep,
this season. So you're getting all kinds of talent and upside there. And it's not a good strikeout matchup, but it's not like it's a great strikeout matchup for DeGrom either. Mike Trout, I don't think is in the lineup. It looks like it's about to come out, and I don't think it has Trout in it. If that's the case, yeah, it just came out. No Mike Trout, so even better spot for Bieber. I think it's a really good tournament play.
Okay. I agree with you, man, just based on that upside alone. He is expensive, Alex, but he's a really, really quality arm. What are your thoughts on Bieber today?
Yeah, I think with Mike Trout out of the lineup, I'm going to have to rethink here, because it looked like a pretty tough matchup. The Angels always are one of the harder teams to strike out, but the lineup today is a little bit easier, although I still have it as below average. But Trout being out of the lineup raised my projection for him by more than a point. And I'm only about 1.3 points away from DeGrom as far as projection. I think the strikeout should be a little bit easier to come by here. Run prevention is a little bit tougher. But I still think, it will depend a little bit on how ownership updates between now and when I build my lineups, because he could rise now that Trout's out of the lineup. But I think he's very reasonable.
Okay. Yeah, I do too. The whole Trout thing is huge, like you just mentioned. I mean, that's just massive.
I think also something to point out with the way this lineup is set up, where in the aggregate it's not the best strikeout matchup, because you have guys like Pujols and Simmons that really, really pull it down. Like, Simmons has struck out 8% of the time against right-handed pitching since last year. Pujols is at like 11 or 12%, but Brian Goodwin leading off 28%. Ohtani hitting third, 24.5%. Upton hitting cleanup, 28.1%. And then Calhoun hitting fifth, 26.1%. So 4 out of the top 6 hitters in this lineup, the guys that are getting more at bats against Bieber, are above average strikeout matchups for him.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. That's why sometimes, Adam, it's a lot more sensible when you're looking at active roster strikeout rates. That's a good source of information on the surface, but once those lineups come out, you've got to compare it to what we've seen all season.
Right, exactly.
All right. What are you doing with bats here, Adam? Unless you want to talk about Sandoval, which I imagine he's not in your plans.
He's not. His strikeout stuff's been really good in the majors so far, but I don't totally buy into it. He struck out like 32% of righties, but if you go back and look at his minor league numbers at AAA, he had good strikeout stuff, but it wasn't anything crazy. Like, I don't see anything in his AAA numbers that makes me think he actually is some crazy reverse splits pitcher and likely to go out there and dominate the Indians. The Indians, on the other hand, do look like they are one of the top stacks on the night, one of the highest top stack percentages. Ownership not really getting that high. I think that Lindor was my top projected shortstop. I think that Puig is a really good value. Jordan Luplow probably back in the lineup is affordable, as is Reyes. So I think Cleveland's up there with Houston as one of my favorite stacks.
Okay. Yeah, what are your thoughts on hitters tonight, Alex, from this game at Angel Stadium? Obviously, Angel bats against Bieber aren't all that appealing, but how about the Cleveland Indians against Sandoval?
Given our current ownership, I really like the Indians. I think Sandoval is a little bit of fool's gold. I agree with Adam that his stats probably aren't going to be the norm for the majors. I mean, his xFIP is 3.5, which is pretty nice. And strikeout percentage so far is 27%. But if you go back to the minors, he was nowhere near those numbers. So I think it's a pretty good spot for the Cleveland Indians, and Milwaukee is really siphoning all the ownership away from them, but they have pretty good price tags tonight. So I'm going to end up on Cleveland a lot.
Okay. Let's get to this last one here. We've got San Diego. We've got the Chicago Cubs. Alex, let's kick it off with you. Kyle Hendricks, Cal Quantrill. Two guys here that are not likely to be very popular. Hendricks in that, right in that low double-digit range on two pitcher sites, and I think that kind of makes sense here. He's 13% on Draftkings and Yahoo, so not a whole lot of love going to Hendricks on any of the three sites. He is, however, facing the San Diego Padres, so we will talk about it because that's what we do. I don't see a lineup yet for either team, but I think we have a pretty good idea of what it'll look like.
Yeah, I think that Hendricks is in a pretty good spot. The price is a little bit high for him across the industry. Aside from Yahoo, he's a little bit cheaper there. The matchup really isn't that great for strikeouts versus the Padres right now. They've been kind of trending downward as the season has gone along. We don't know for certain what their lineup's going to look like, but one of the knocks against it is Kyle Quantrill is going to be at the pitcher slot, and he just rarely strikes out, only 22% on the year. So I like it, but don't love it. I think I'll have a sprinkle of Hendricks, but not core play tonight. Kyle Quantrill is a little bit in a tougher spot versus the Cubs, who are one of the better lineups. They also don't strike out a ton, and he's not as cheap as some other guys like Williams and Kelly. But I do have interest on FanDuel where he's 6,400. That is kind of where I think he should be, and that might be a guy I'll take a flyer on.
Okay. Adam, either side of this pitching matchup?
They're both kind of similar to me in that I think they compare – they're comparable to the pitchers around them in salary, but neither one's a guy that I just really want to get to. Like, Hendricks is in a fine spot, but like Alex said, the San Diego team just doesn't have as many strikeouts as they did for most of the season, and it's tough for me to pay a little bit more for Hendricks than for guys like Lyles against the Marlins or even Greinke, because even Greinke has a higher strikeout percentage than Hendricks does. And then for Quantrill, tough matchup for him against the Cubs. There is a chance that we get a watered-down lineup here. Chris Bryant, questionable. Baez, I don't think might be on the injured list, or at least isn't supposed to play tonight. So, at least some chance there. And he is cheap, and it's not like Trevor Williams or Merrill Kelly are good pitchers either. But, I think it's just a tougher matchup for him than for like Trevor Williams. So neither guy's a priority for me.
Okay. Do you have priorities at the hitter positions at all on either side, starting with the Cubs, who are right now projected to have the second most ownership as a stack? I don't think that's a big surprise either.
I think that and like I said, the Cubs lineup has a pretty wide range of outcomes right now as far as who could be in it. But I think that lefties are normally what you're looking for against Quantrill, so that would make Rizzo and Schwarber appealing. But they're also expensive, especially Schwarber, who's 5,200 on DraftKings. The one thing that does stand out is that the Cubs called up Nico Horner, who is, according to Fangraphs, their top prospect and the 51st overall prospect in baseball. He has been at Double-A this year. He doesn't have a ton of power, doesn't have a ton of speed, but he is 2,100 at Double-A. In 70 games, he has 3 home runs and 8 stolen bases. So it's not like he's the highest upside play, but apparently he's a top prospect, and he's 2,100 on DraftKings.
Adam, do you do anything different at this time of the year with expanded rosters? Is there anything in your process that changes?
Did you ask me?
Yeah.
No. The biggest difference is that you will often lose some at-bats for your hitters, like towards the end of the games, because they just have so many available pinch hitters. If, it's an 8-0 game or something like that, they can literally just pinch it for the entire lineup. But I don't really know a good way to counteract that. I don't think just not stacking is the answer. And so it's nothing that I change. It's just, if anything, I think creates a little bit more variance.
Yeah, that's fair. Do you do anything differently in your process, Alex, if there even is anything to do? I think it's worth talking about, just being that things change a lot once September rolls around.
I think one note here, on DraftKings, Horner is available. He's super cheap. He even looks like he may have broke our ownership algorithm based on this 40% figure. That seems a little bit egregious, but I think the fact that he's not on Fanduel or Yahoo is going to change my approach on those sites. Since this is a National League game, having only 7 hitters, as we mentioned on the show a few times, it really limits the number of combinations of guys you can get. So that is a downgrade to the entire team for stacking. And that would be a reason why maybe I would have less Cubs tonight on Fanduel and Yahoo.
Okay. Yeah, it's a tough spot once you get here. You're juggling football and baseball, and then we'll be juggling basketball. But at least the season will be fresh and we'll be excited. Alex, what are your thoughts on hitters? I don't think we've gotten to you on that yet for this San Diego Cubs game.
I think the Cubs are somewhat interesting. As I mentioned, the fact that they only have 7 hitters is a little bit of a downgrade. I think that on DraftKings, they're pretty fairly priced. So I can see myself getting some decent amounts of Cubs. San Diego, I think, is pretty reasonably priced as well, especially on Yahoo, where maybe Greg Garcia and Nick Martini at $7, if they're high in the lineup, could be really good values. And the stack as a whole, it doesn't have a ton of potential, but the prices are decent.
Okay. Anything else to add on this one, Alex or Adam?
Not for me.
Nope.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and hit our top stacks before we head out. Adam, you already mentioned that this Houston team is very appealing to you, especially given that they aren't seeing a ton of ownership. Who are your favorite stacks tonight?
Houston and Cleveland,
Okay.
with the way things look right now.
What about you, Alex?
Cleveland, the Yankees, and my deep sleeper is Oakland.
Okay, so the anti-optimizer stack would be Oakland?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we've got some more programming coming up, as we always do, and because it's such an exciting time for daily fantasy sports, it's not just Live Before Lock coming up next, which you definitely need to stick around for and watch it. It's not on the same channel, or it's not on the same page, but it is on the same channel. That's coming up in just a few minutes, and that'll be your boys, Nolan and Emac. Do we actually, you know what? Do we not have an MLB Live Before Lock today? Why is that?
The reason why is because there's an NFL slate at 6, so I'm sure a lot of you guys are pretty excited to play that, so we're going to be covering that in the next hour. The inactives just came out, Kiki Kuti inactive, so I think tonight could be a pretty good night to play, because I feel like a lot of people are thinking Kenny Stills, just join the team and he'll be the third wideout, but I'm pretty skeptical given that he just joined the team. So I think it could be an interesting one.
Yeah, is JJ Nelson active?
That's in the 10 p.m. game, so we
right,
for a while.
Who'd you ask about, Adam?
JJ Nelson.
Oh, yeah, still waiting on that. I keep forgetting that because there's 2 games, it's not an 8:30 kickoff. It's 7:10 Eastern time. So, yeah, Nolan and EMAC are going to take you up to a lock. You definitely want to stick around. This is the best Monday night slate of the season, man. Nothing beats 2 Monday night games on week 1. I mean, don't get me wrong. Many games will beat this 10 o'clock game. It is going to suck. But from a DFS standpoint, having an additional game to work into the slate is awesome, especially given that this Saints and Houston game should be great. You know what? We've got a couple minutes here. We'll hand it off to Nolan and EMAC in a minute. But let's talk about this for a second, fellas. I got a decent amount of action on this one tonight because it is the 2-gamer. I'm not good at the showdown, so being that it isn't one, I figured why not. Alex, I think there are a couple spots here that could be like the make or break spots on the slate. Tell me what you think. One of them being with Kike QT out, as you mentioned, who gets that work, if anyone? Maybe it just goes more to Hopkins and more to Will Fuller, which is a distinct possibility. And then in New Orleans, Traquan Smith last year, look, it was bizarre, but the guy was maybe the worst receiver in the league on the road. And then for some reason in home games, he would just go off and post monster numbers. Don't ask me why, but it happened. Either way, he's another year into his career. He's flashed a lot of upside, but he's going to get low projections everywhere. Then you've got like Ted Ginn and Keith Kirkwood on the same team. So I think, and then of course the Hunter Renfrow spots and whether or not JJ Nelson plays. I don't know about you, but it feels like that third receiver spot for a lot of these teams could kind of be the make or break point as the cheap players on tonight's 2-game slate.
Yeah, you hit on a couple of guys I think are really interesting tonight. I mean, there's so much that we don't know, but Keith Kirkwood was getting a lot of snaps over Traquan Smith late in the season last year. They had basically the same rotation with Ted Ginn and Michael Thomas. So I think he could be like a sneaky play that could win you a tournament because, man, no one's talking about him. Like, he wasn't even on Fantasy Cruncher until I just refreshed it. So I could see some potential there. Kind of a low probability play, though. DeAndre Carter for Houston. He's the guy that I'd be expecting to go in and take some of the role that Kuti being out creates. And I think he might be a reasonable play, despite most people not knowing who he is.
Adam, have you looked into this slate?
Not really, but I did just register some tournaments because I've been going back and forth and then talking about it. I decided I wanted to play. But
juices going.
What'd you say?
Got your juices flowing.
Yeah, exactly. Duke Johnson too. I think could just get more targets with QT being out.
Yeah, I think so. And another spot with Phillip Lindsay. I'm not a big Phillip Lindsay guy, but I'm kind of just taking the approach of until we see otherwise, I have to assume that he's still the guy. And I don't know, Adam. Royce Freeman hasn't shown really anything. We're expecting some type of emergence from him. He was an early draft pick, a lot of hype in his rookie season, but hasn't done anything to prove it yet, while Phillip Lindsay came out of nowhere to wrestle away that number 1 spot. I guess it is kind of sketchy because we don't know what that backfield would look like. Devontae Booker's still there. But I don't know. Are you taking the approach of until I see differently, I have to assume that, Phillip Lindsay is still the guy?
I think that's probably the right approach as far as medium projections go. But I think there's also enough uncertainty, just like we were talking about the receiver spots, where when you're playing a 2-game slate, you can get an advantage by just kind of being on the side of that other people don't want to be on.
Right. And I hear you. The interesting thing, though, is that Lindsay, I mean, what's he projected at, like 30% ownership, which really isn't that high at 5,200. So I definitely agree. The other side of it, where Royce Freeman's getting no ownership, is appealing. We got a couple minutes. What do you make of, and we'll segue this nicely into the Live Before Lock show. What do you make of this backfield for the Broncos right now in a game, Alex, that is it's a pick'em right now between 2 really bad football teams?
Yeah, I think that Lindsay, he was just off the charts last year with his effectiveness. So I think that It might be a hot hand situation, but he'd be the guy that is most likely to go off. I think everyone kind of understands that. I think one guy I haven't heard people talk about at all is Devontae Booker. He's their third down back, and in a huge slate with so many entries, like having a guy like that's kind of off the radar, maybe that gets you a big payout without talking with so many people.
All right. I'm not a narrative guy, even though I posted that Deshaun Jackson narrative and he crushed it. Adam, serious question, right? Because sometimes teams can play inspired football. The problem is when they're bad, but is there anything to the idea that Oakland is essentially just basically left for dead out there in the black hole? They call it that for a reason. Is there the possibility that Oakland comes out here and just plays inspired football despite their lack of talent tonight in the home opener of the season?
I mean, I'm sure they would like to. Like,
that's what I'm saying. Right. Sometimes you actually need talent. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, but like, how well can they play?
Yeah, and you can't really factor that into your projections. So, what are you going to do? Any final thoughts on this slate, Alex, before we hand it off to Nolan and EMAC?
I think it'll be really interesting, kind of like the sleeper picks you can pick. I know Hunter Renfroe has gotten a ton of hype. That's some guy. So I think it's a lot based on like the way he looks. He just doesn't really look like he's athletic. So I think it might be kind of that play where he's like just someone that people think is like a cute pick or something. I haven't projected him to do okay, but I think the hype is unreal with him. A guy I might be more interested in is Jalen Richard. I mean, they don't play the same position, but that's a guy who was heavily involved in the Raiders' offense last year as the third down back, and always a guy that goes underowned.
Yeah, I think a lot of that will come down to if they're playing from behind or not. Mm-hmm. And the only other, let me ask you this. We got 2 minutes. Do you worry that even though he was the third down back last year and was involved, they didn't have a first-round pick in Josh Jacobs to, soak up the majority of work out of that backfield? For
sure, yeah. I mean, I'm extremely worried about that. But you're not going to be comfortable with every player in your lineup. You got to take some shots here.
Absolutely. Final thoughts, Adam. What do you got here? Well, give me one take for tonight. Give me one hot take for tonight's games. I'm putting you on the spot here, but I got 1 minute left, and I'm damn right going to fill it.
If he plays, J.J. Nelson's my favorite receiver on the Raiders.
All right. Would you say he's your favorite value receiver on the slate?
I don't even know what the other choices are, but off the top of my head, I think so.
So you'd like him more than Tyrell Williams?
Well, I don't even know Williams' price, but yeah, I just think. What'd you say?
Tyrell Williams is 4,400.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like if you're playing cash games, it's Tyrell Williams. I just think that Nelson probably goes really overlooked, and I think that from what he does on the field standpoint, he's actually the guy that probably really can benefit from Brown being gone.
You don't really need to know much about this slate to answer this question, because I think you're a perfect person I could ask. You or Alex will be perfect for this. Being that we probably won't get the news until after the first game is well in progress, how would you handle something like that?
I think I'm trying to look now, but is Ryan Grant like the price as Nelson? Or is anybody on the Raiders that you could like pivot to the same price? Because that would make it easier.
I can give you Renfroe. Renfroe is 3,600, and Nelson is 3,200. So there is that. Ryan Grant is 3,000. So yeah, it would work. Just more so with Renfroe.
I'll crunch with Nelson in, and then global swap to Ryan Grant.
Okay, there you have it. That'll do it for us. Hey, before you head out, if you enjoy the show, want to see more, you want to help support us, all the crew and awesomemode.com, hit us with a thumbs up and like the video. We'll love you forever if you do so. Subscribe, hit that notification bell as well. Stick around after the show. You've got Nolan Kelly. You've got Eric McPherson, known as EMAC, coming up live before lock, NFL Monday Night Football. This has been the Deeper Dive presented by Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, and we will see you tomorrow.